When you have your cast ready and it's been refined and you're ready to make your first cuts to create your die, you're going to take the circular saw, the circular cutting burr on your straight attachment in order to make the first vertical cut. Personally, I do not like taking this blade anywhere near my finish line. I simply cut below the finish line on both sides and of course on the underside of the cast in order to liberate the die from the rest of the cast. As you can see, I went from the buckle, now I'm going to do the same thing from the lingual. You might have noticed that I had some guidelines drawn in, and if you feel like these guidelines are a little incorrectly placed, by all means, feel free to correct them for yourself. The point is, again, to make sure that these cuts leave enough bulk of stone between the pins and the edge of your die, such that the pins won't crack and neither will the die itself. You don't want it to be too thin, and you certainly don't want it to be too thick because then you'll compromise adjacent teeth. As you might be noticing, I'm trying to take the circular blade as far into the stone as I possibly can because this will make separating the two pieces that much easier when I'm finally done. So going from the various angles to a buckle, lingual, the underside, and when you finally feel like you've cut enough, you'll see that I grab my lab knife. First I'm going to blow some air. Then I'm going to grab my lab knife and try to separate it. Making sure that you're placing only into the crack from the underside or the buccal lingual sides, and there it pops. Because there's a physical separation of at least a millimeter between the finish line and the adjacent tooth, you will notice that the finish line is actually completely unharmed. And the rough portion of this die that you see here is where your lab knife just sheared the stone away, while the smoother portions are those that were made by that circular cutting burr. Now what we're going to have to do is refine these areas and remove all this roughness with the acrylic burr, same as we did when we cut the lingual or palatal portion of the cast in the earlier video. So again, take your acrylic burr and just smooth out the entire surface. This makes insertion and removal of the die very easy if you smooth it out, and of course it also makes it so that it doesn't lock in. Again, when you are cutting anything that's close to the finish line, be very, very careful. One slip of the hand, and if you compromise your finish line, you will have to restart the entire process of pouring up if you have your PBS impression. So best to be careful and not be hasty. Okay, so having refined most of this, both of the sides, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to pick up this inverted pear burr. It kind of looks like a large 330. Place it in my straight attachment, and I'm going to create something that's called the emergence profile. The emergence profile is basically taking away the gingiva or the part of their stone cast that is representing the gingiva so that you have just the root of the tooth. The idea is to create a sort of profile so that when you wax up your crown, you'll have a more accurate, well-contoured wax up. This is an essential step in order to make sure that your castings will come out a lot better. So what you basically do is you take this inverted this inverted pear burr, and you place it gingival to your finish line, significantly gingival to your finish line. And what you're trying to do is mimic what would happen if you could visualize the tooth. So remove anything that looks like gingiva and just try to create that perfect profile so that when you start to wax up, you'll be able to create a crown that isn't too bulky. Some people also like to do this emergence profile as one step. Personally, I like doing it as two steps. Do the emergence profile on one side, then make the second vertical cut, and do the emergence profile on the other side. In this case, because I did the mesial cut first, I'm just establishing the emergence profile on the buccal, lingual, and mesial surfaces, while the distal one will be done after I make my vertical cut in the distal.
Okay, time to make the second cut.
Okay, I'm cleaning it up, and I'm about ready to make the second vertical cut. So I'm going to switch out again for that circular cutting burr, and I'm going to place it in my straight handpiece, and I'm ready to make the second vertical cut. So again, same concept as before. Go from all three sides, buccal, lingual, and the underside of the cast. And again, as you can see, I'm getting very close to my die, very close to my finish line, but I never actually reach it. And that's because you don't want to take any cutting implement within range of your finish line. And once again, cutting from all three directions. This is a lot easier than before because now I have a lot less stone to worry about, and I can approach this in a lot of different angles. So take that circular burr all the way to depth, as far as it'll go, in order to, again, remove as much stone before you have to separate it with your lab knife. All the way to depth. And I'm trying to separate it with just my fingers to see how much there is. And I realized I can still go to depth on the buccal side. So now I think it's about ready to be separated with the lab knife. So I'm going to go grab my lab knife again, place, move it, there you are. Now you notice that again you have this roughness, and we're going to have to smooth it out. Once again, the finish line itself remains untouched because there is a physical separation between the finish line and the adjacent tooth. Back to the acrylic burr, back to refinement, and let's see what happens. Now you can see why this emergence profile is a pretty critical step, because you want to have the circumference around your crown prep such that it will allow you to contour your wax up. If we did not do this step, you could potentially, when you do your preliminary wax up before you cast, have it over contoured. In this particular case, because I already established the emergence profile with the inverted pear-shaped burr, I'm now going with just a large football burr, being very careful again not to nick my finish line in any capacity, but I'm going all the way around the tooth in order to create the emergence profile. I also noticed an imperfection on this particular cast, which I decided to go ahead and correct with the football burr, which was on the buccal side. This process is not particularly difficult, but it can be a bit nerve-wracking because you're taking this burr that could potentially ruin your finish line all the way as close as possible without really nicking it. And as you can see, if you go from the underside up towards the finish line, you'll never in any real danger of damaging your die. So I'm cleaning it once again because I think I've done enough of this emergence profile establishment. And now I'm going to look at the entire finish line to make sure that throughout this entire process I didn't damage it in any way. Seems pretty unharmed and fine. So I'm going to refine the final piece of the cast that I didn't before. And this has to just be very rough and quick. Try not to ruin the interproximal contact of the tooth, but everything below it, just make it flat and smooth so that, again, you can insert and remove your dies or pieces of the cast very easily from the base. Okay. Final little bit of refinement before I place it all back into the base and complete this mandibular Pindex. If you can place all three of these pieces back without much trouble and see little gaps in between them, you've done this process successfully. And there you have it.
Cut.